Invited him back to occupy our best out of 3 spots for the next few weeks. So let's tune in a few more chuckles with Bob Monkhouse.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really breathless tonight. I've been making a picture with a new British film company, Miracle Movies Incorporated. They have a slogan: if it's a good picture, it's a miracle. And they've just finished making a picture. It's all about the West. It's a wonderful thing. It's called I Knew He Was a Cowboy by the Way He Admired My Calves.
For this week's Archive Hour, I thought we'd nip round to Bob Monkhouse's place, preferably when he's in, to rifle through his personal comedy library. Covering his 50-plus years in the business, he started as a callow 19-year-old in 1947. So it all ranges from shellac right the way through to digital.
No, but where could I find an operator? There was only one place to find an operator: the telephone exchange.
I thought we might also surprise him with some crinkly sheaves from the corporation's own written repository. Like this memo. When he started, teenage comics were rare, and the BBC insisted he sought the permission of a parent or guardian just to appear on a variety bill. I bet Jimmy Clitheroe never had that trouble.
To me, your voice was like music. Your face was like music. Your figure was like music. Such a pity they all had the Spike Jones arrangement.
Well, soon after that, he and Dennis Goodwin became the hardest-working writer-performer team in the land. Kind of 50s Paul Whitehouse and Charlie Higson. Though, dare I say, even harder working than them. I first met Bob Monkhouse about 18 months ago in the Bob department of the BBC, where we collaborated on a series about Bob Hope.
But then, suddenly, no matter how I tried to put my ideas on paper, it wouldn't come out. What was wrong? After 3 days, I found out there was no ink in my pen.
I first became aware of Bob Monkhouse in the early 60s, when he starred as a venal disc jockey, is there any other kind, in the Muir and Norden sitcom The Big Noise. No, you won't have seen any repeats. It soon fell into the hands of the Wipings and Erasure unit, thereafter becoming available only as part of the BBC Refuse collection.
I was studying music at the time. I was working on my tribute to sport, the cricket concerto. I'd decided on the pitch, but I couldn't work out the score.
If you're trying to make a living as a comedy writer, and after 20 years I'm still hoping to, Monkhouse is an inspiration not so much for his diligence and application, because, come on, we can all do that, it only takes effort. No, it's more for his sheer love of jokes. That's what keeps him as busy as ever on stage, TV, and, happily for us, radio, way beyond any need to pay mortgages or feed families, including his own. He's simply an avid comedy fan. And in his 73rd year, he knows as much as I do about current shows like Dead Ringers and The League of Gentlemen. But as we ensconced ourselves in a room that was about 2% human, 98% metal oxide, I asked him to go back and name his first radio love.
On radio, I suppose, really, it was when Bandwagon came along with Arthur Askey and Richard Murdoch that I fell totally head over heels in love with that programme and the idea of doing radio. In fact, that was my best friend, my little radio. It was a Canadian radio my father had put in my room because he knew how much I loved it. And I remember it had some kind of resistor built into the electric lead that went into the plug, so that the lead would become quite warm as the resistance to whatever the current was translated into whatever the Canadian set required. So this slightly, it was covered in material. I would wind it round my head, and sometimes I would suck it. Why I'm here alive to tell you this, I cannot imagine.
Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with another bandwagon containing the old ingredients.
Yeah, that's enough. I'm not old, and I'm not greedy, except very often.
I didn't say greedy.
Big-hearted Arthur. That's me. Let me get it in.
Yes. I didn't say greedy. I said ingredients.
Yes.
You know what ingredients are, don't you?
Yes, they're articles of underwear.
How on earth do you make that out?
Well, now, listen here. You see, an up gradient's a step up, a down gradient's a step down, so ingredients must be step-ins. See?
No.
Leonard Henry, too, was a comedian that I found fascinating. He gurgled as he talked. His voice went up and down. I thought that was terribly funny. In fact, I actually sent him some jokes once when I was in my teens. And he wrote to my parents to tell them to punish me suitably.
So let's all sing the last song.
Oh, the last song. Good Lord.
let's all sing the
Lads. I remember this.
Drive all our cares away.
Oh, I love this.
Rubinstein would never stand a chance. We want something we can sing and dance. So let's all sing and make the rafters ring. La-di-da-di-da-da.
La-di-da-di-da-di-da. Did he start with la-di-da-di-da and say, make it a lard song? Or did he start by saying, I'm going to sing about lard, and then realise la-di-da-di-da would give him a good finish?
I think if it had been me, I'd have started with la-di-da-di-da
Yeah.
and worked backwards,
Yes.
wouldn't you?
Yes, having gone through Vodio, Vodio, Do and found there was nothing there except dough.
Yes.
And
And lard is more substantial than dough, isn't it? It's more
Yes, it
filling,
is.
really.
that was marvellous.
Is that the first time you've heard that since your
Since
boyhood?
I was 9, I should think. Because he was on the radio continually around that time, the late 30s, which is why I loved him so much and why I wrote to him saying, I have some good jokes for you. I think I said he could buy them for 6 each or something.
Well, let's have a look at his reply. He said to you, "Young man, please do not send me any more of your nonsense. For a boy of 12, you are a very persistent and impudent little fellow.
Yes.
I put you upon your honour to show this letter to your parents." Did you show your parents?
Oh, yes.
To them, I would say this.
They beat me senseless.
Oh, if I had been such an arrogant child, my father would have administered corporal punishment. I say no more. So your dad took the hint.
The suggestion was there that I should be whacked. I don't think they did. I think they just thought, what a nasty man.
Yes.
And I got away with it.
Corporal punishment. And at the bottom, he's got the phrase, "laugh with Leonard."
Yes.
Not many laughs in that letter.
That was printed on in red dye stamp. I can see it now.
So, did that put you off him a bit, getting that letter?
I suppose it did, though. It didn't put me off anyone else. I wrote to all the others. I wrote to Arthur Askew, who was absolutely my hero, and never dreaming that I would eventually write for him and appear with him and have him on my shows, and that dream would ever happen. I never conceived. What I loved about that was the fact that the machinery of the movies would send back photographs apparently signed by the star, whereas the BBC didn't do that. But so as soon as Arthur started making movies, I was able to write to the film company, and likewise that applied to the Crazy Gang and everyone else. Then I found out that I could go up to the Palladium, because my parents had taken me to the Palladium to see the Crazy Gang. So I was potty about Flanagan and Allen, Norton and Gold and Nervo and Knox. And at the age of 14 or 15, I would travel up to London from Beckenham, where we lived, from Beckenham Junction to Victoria, and then I would go make my way by bus to the Palladium and wait outside for the Crazy Gang to get their autographs.
Life is crazy as can be, whether on the land or whether on the sea.
But life, it wouldn't be worth the fuss if it wasn't for the likes of clubs like us. We, our jesters, make life go with a bang. So come and have a jolly good with the Crazy Gang.
And once it was Teddy Knox of Nervo and Knox took my autograph book. He said, "You look familiar." I said, "Well, thank you, sir, I'm often here." And so he flipped through the book and found out he'd signed it 7 times. And he hit me on the head with it sideways. Oh, that didn't half hurt. Didn't put me off him either, because I thought, well, I would be irritated if I found a boy who got me 7 times and was asking for an 8th autograph. God knows I was obsessed.
Well, at least he recognised you.
Yes.
Nice to be recognised by a top comic.
That's a nightmare.
Dinner, don't talk to me about dinner. My breakfast lies over the ocean. My luncheon lies over the sea. My stomach is in a commotion. Don't mention my dinner to me.
They were a bit peculiar, the Crazy Gang, weren't they? In that, well, it always seemed to me odd that you had all these double acts all under one banner.
Yes, that came about really because they were pals. They liked one another. And so they had a crazy week at the Palladium, about 1932, I think it was, in which they just booked all the double acts. Every act was going to be comedy. It was a very bold move, and of course far too indigestible, a banquet for the audience. After about an hour, I think their laughter evaporated. I would hate to go on last.
Jimmy, have you got your accordion with you?
Yeah, do you want me to play it?
Of course, come on, play.
All right.
I love that.
Goodbye, we're off for fresh adventure, and somewhere they are certain to be found. There's no need to be sad, for there's laughter to be had, if you only care to look around.
But some of the energy and some of the magic couldn't be reproduced in their older years.
For we don't care a hang but we are loopy, but we're masters making whoopee. Revelation, crazy day. So long, customers.
I think most people, unless they're going to see a character comic where age perhaps may be helpful, don't want to see signs of mortality in a comedian. And most of the comedians I worked for over the years, their careers ended at about 60, age 60. Sometimes that was because the fire in the belly had gone out, and they said, well, I've got the car in the garage and the fur coat and the diamonds on the wife and the children are grown. I don't need to do it anymore. But those who were driven by a real compulsion to try and make people laugh, those who were as driven in their own way as I have always been to pursue this particular line of work, they were very sad to find themselves feeling old and lacking in energy and not getting the same laughs.
And to see that everyone stays happy, there's me, Tommy Trinder. You lucky people.
Tommy Trinder, I know, was genuinely hurt by the fact that he couldn't fill theatres anymore. And he had been so successful. Yes. And he was so brilliant a comedian. Wonderful.
I went into a restaurant the other day. He said to a fella, I'd like a steak and chips. He said, awfully sorry, no steak. I said, OK, I'll have a chop and chips. He said, sorry, no chops. I said, what do you got? He said, sausages. I said, well, I'll have sausages and chips. He said, sorry, no chips. I said, well, what have you got to go with the sausages? He said, a few kind words. I said, OK, sausages and a few kind words. When he brought the sausages, I said to the waiter, just a minute, what about a few kind words? He said, OK, I wouldn't eat those sausages.
But he wound up playing the Chinese policeman in pantomime with hardly any billing. And he was very amiable about that towards the end and seemed to accept it. But I did feel his pain when his fame had so deteriorated that he couldn't get work. I really don't want that to happen to me.
I don't think it's going to.
Well,
no signs of it so far.
I've doubled and redoubled my efforts to keep a grip and to keep reinventing myself so that I can be in there, battling, as it were, to keep my position. And I also have a very good agent who's looked after me wonderfully well for 30 years and more. So I don't think it'll happen until I actually turn my toes up. But I can't expect to remain an attraction until I'm 90. I know that can't happen.
So now, getting into the BBC as a comic, there was really no shortcut, theoretically, because you had to go through the audition process, and there was a very, very long queue, I think. But you found a way of jumping this.
Yes, I did, Bob. Well, perhaps Leonard Henry wasn't far from the truth when he said I was both persistent and impudent. I certainly must have been. I was 18 years old in the RAF. And I wanted to, very much, I got my corporal stripes, and I was a secretary to a neuropsychiatrist, Group Captain Thompson. And he got to trust me, so I would type all his forms out, and all his letters and all his documents, and all he would do was come in and sign them. So in among them went a letter that addressed to the BBC saying that I have this particular patient who is in psychiatric trauma, or whatever the word was used at that time. Or will get worse unless he's granted an audition by the BBC, as he's fixated upon the idea about being on the radio. Well, that time, we're talking 1946, 47, the queue of entertainers coming out of the forces, being demobbed, who'd gone in at the beginning of the war, was 18 months long. But I skipped the entire process because they decided the BBC they had to do something for Our Boys in Blue. And so I went along and did my audition for them. And luckily for me, Dennis Mayne Wilson, who had just come over from Cologne, where he'd been running Forces Radio, was asked to deputise for the normal auditioner, who gave very low marks to everybody. And Dennis Mayne Wilson, who was in a state of nervous collapse at the time, gave me 101 marks out of 100. He gave 100 to my companion, who was the singer Gary Miller. Then he gave me 101% out of 100, and wrote "Wow" next to me, my name. And then he fell on the floor, and they took him away, and he was in hospital for about 6 months. But nobody knew that at the BBC. All they knew that the auditions were being circulated, and here was suddenly, for the first time ever, two guys had got 100%, one had got 100%.
I have in my hand a photocopied piece of parchment, which may be of interest to you.
Thank you, Bob.
Let me read you this. Dennis Wilson, obviously Dennis Mayne Wilson,
yes,
describes you as young, mid-20s, slight American accent.
How extraordinary.
An excellent comic. Not a bad singing voice for a comedian.
Ah.
Very good delivery. Material is very good, except what does it say there?
Except in unbroadcastable parts.
Now, what does he mean by this? The material's very good, except when it's not very good, is what he seems to be saying
When
here.
he seems to be a bit saucy, I think he meant to say. I mean, I used to do lines like, I got out of a sick bed to come here today, my fiancée has a cold, which would not have been broadcastable
No,
at that time.
absolutely not.
Far too cheeky.
Has excellent personality. He will be a star, capital S-T-A-R, one day in the not-too-distant future. A born natural. Oh, what a find, double exclamation mark, sort out script, and send.
Well,
and then a big yes at the
okay,
bottom.
big yes at the bottom. And that's dated the 10th of December, 1947. It's addressed to 17 Wigmore Street, where Philip Brown, an ex-BBC producer, had set up an agency and was representing me. Well,
And there's the letter that Dennis sent to you, care of Philip Brown. Do you want to read that out?
Dear Mr. Monkhouse, this is the 11th of December, 1947. Thank you for coming along to the studio last night. This is just to confirm my remarks to the effect that you did pass, and we shall be calling you forward for a final recorded audition before a panel of our senior producers in due course. In the meantime, wishing you all the best. Yours sincerely, Dennis Wilson, Variety Auditions.
And there beside it, a letter to him in your own hand.
In my own hand. The signature's slightly immature. Dear Mr. In fact, the whole style of writing is rather weird. Dear Mr. Wilson, many apologies, but due to difficulties of transport, it will not be possible for me to reach Film House before approximately 9:25 tonight. I hope that you will find it convenient to see me at that time, and again apologise for the delay. Bob Monkhouse audition due 9 o'clock.
What were you doing for those intervening 25 minutes?
Isn't that interesting? I wonder...
Does this relate to the joke about the fiancé in any way?
No, I don't think so. I think more likely to relate to my duties in the RAF.
Oh, well, I know all about it, of course. I spent 3 years with the RAF at Blackpool. I was part of the shower in the tower, and I, Oh, you needn't think just because I was at Blackpool I wasn't in danger. I was. I was in great danger of being posted, and This is about my first day in the forces. What a day that was. The sergeant gave me the button stick. I told the sergeant where to stick the buttons, and we started from there.
Because around about the same time you auditioned for TV. Let me just show you another couple of gems from the written archives. Look at this here. This is
These are
memos
amazing
and
documents.
such like.
These documents have survived. It's astonishing. Does all this exist on your career as well? I mean, if I looked up Bob Sinfield...
I doubt it. I didn't have to audition, you see. That's why I'm here. If I'd had to, maybe somebody else would be doing this job.
If you'd asked me my parents' phone number, I could have told you it was 2302. Isn't that funny?
You know, the Beckenham exchange.
Very crude patter.
Yes.
Very crude
What
patter.
did they mean by that?
In 7 minutes, is intelligent and performs with verve and attack. Script hopeless, but would prove suitable with different material. Obviously, I was being much too saucy.
Well, now, what was it? Was it saucy, or do they mean crude in the unformed sense, or do they mean filth?
No, I suspect it would be that I was being too suggestive, because BBC's rules and regulations, 1947, were incredibly strict.
Well, Max Miller was banned for years.
Yes, he was. And there's various stories, I think mostly apocryphal, about why he was banned. The joke that he's supposed to have told was he met this girl on a single-track suspension bridge, and he wanted to be courteous, and he didn't know whether to block her passage or toss himself off. If that was the joke he did, you can understand that at that time, one or two Victorian sort of attitudes would have been sharp.
He's a boy, isn't he, eh? Hope so.
Timing. He was timing on legs, that man.
Can you tell? You can't tell. You can't tell. You can change overnight.
See how he slows up, repeats himself, emphasis, little touches. He's a master of technique.
That's nice, Maxie. That is nice.
Why does that make us chuckle?
Oh, Maxie. That's down, is it, Ira? That one's down. Must be the cold weather.
Always the innuendo.
Well, there's the first song, the song entitled The Girls Who Do.
What's the timing on the last line of
Shall I
this?
start it off, Ira? Shall I start it off? Yes, you start it off. I'll start it off, and you'll creep in, won't you? You'll creep in.
You'll
Creep in.
You'll creep in.
I'll give you the key.
Yes.
might be home before me, see? I never fall in love with the first girl that I meet. I like to find out first if she lives down my street. I play the waiting game, on that you may depend. To find the girl I'm looking for, I'll get her in the end. I don't like a girl too short, I don't like a girl too tall. As long as she's a sport, for me she's bound to fall. I don't like a girl with brains, I much prefer to dance. Who'll stop me and buy one? She'd like to try one, and I'll try anything one. Here. I don't like the girls who paint their cheeks just like a rose. They may look what they ain't, with powder on their nose. They're painting their toenails. The thing that makes me vex is the way they're dressing. They've got me guessing. I wonder what they're going to paint next year.
Dives right off the punchline.
I don't like a girl a bit stuck up and brags a lot and says that she's got it, what the others haven't got. They all look alike to me. I'm meeting her tonight. If she's got that, what she thinks is it, then I think I'll be all here.
I love it. I think I'll be all here. Paying the audience the compliment all the time of letting them put the last word in.
I started courting a smashing fan dancer.
Letting them use their imagination.
To marry her, that was my plan.
Never confronting them with just a blatant fact.
Now it's all off with the smashing fan dancer.
But always suggesting it tangentially.
She fell down and damaged her fan. Here!
I love that with Miller. Was just... And you couldn't... Unless you knew what he was up to, the audience didn't care about his technique, so they weren't analysing what he was doing. But once you know what he's up to, he's just a master. He's just a walking lexicon, he was, of every kind of comic trick that a stand-up needs.
And he was rather more helpful to you, I think, than Leonard Henry, wasn't he?
A few years later, we were doing a big charity do at the London Coliseum, produced by Michael North, who produced Music Hall on Saturday nights on radio, home service. Was it the Light Programme? No, I think it moved to the Light Programme. And what am I talking about? So I'm doing this. I went on early in this show, and I didn't do it terribly well. I did all right. But Miller had seen me before and pretended to remember me. I don't think he did, but he was very nice about it. I told him I wrote jokes for him, and I met him outside the Lewisham Hippodrome. He said, "Oh, I remember your son." Yeah, right. What time is the boy going on, Michael? Michael said, "Oh, he's doing the first comedy spot." "Well, put me a chair in the wings. I'll have a look at him." He obviously wasn't well. And in fact, he was to die a couple of years later. But he sat in the wings and he watched me do my spot, which was about 12 minutes. And in that big place, I hadn't got the technique for handling such a big theatre. The audience was kind, but no better than that. And then he said, "Come with me," he said, and he took me back into the... you could park outside in those days. He took me into his Rolls-Royce. Max 1 was the number plate. And we sat in the back. He opened a little silver flask and sipped from it. Didn't offer it to me. But what he did offer me was a complete analysis of what he'd seen me do. He told me where my mistakes were. He told me where I wasn't pausing enough. I wasn't giving the audience a chance to see that I was being saucy. He said audacity was all right. I could be audacious. You know the word? Do you know the word, son? Is audacity? Is that a word to you? Yes, I think I understand you. Well, that's fine. You can be audacious, but you mustn't be dirty. Not a young man. I can do it. They can see I've seen a bit of life. Little things like missing that technique of his of missing the last word off. He said, "You've got to do it. You've got to do it just right. You've got to make sure they're going to get the message. You can do it with rhymes because they'll fill in the rhyme easily enough."
Alas, that poor girl, she's gone home to her mother till her fan is mended or she gets another, you know? And then you all come in with, "Oh dear, what can the matter?"
But it's quite a trick, he said, to also remember, take a little step back. when you want them to applaud. Take a little step back and clap your hands. And they'll probably join in.
A Pavlovian response.
Yes. And I remember seeing Askew do that. Askew would take that check step back, and I still do it myself. If it's the equivalent of going, "Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen," or raising a hat, or having a coordinate. Yes. But it's subtler than that, and it gets through to them on a different level. They don't see you do it. They just do it. They just react to it. And those were the tricks he would discuss with me. Repetition, lay it in. Don't just tell them once. Tell them twice to make sure that they've got the message.
It's the middle bit. That's what I'm after, the middle bit. I should get it. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. Might come to me about 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't know.
Would they have got it, though? The people that... the people that were in charge, because I always thought that jumping ahead 20 years or so round the horn, Julian and Sandy got away with
that was
the
brilliant.
most outrageous lines, because not only did the corporation top brass not understand, but possibly the producer didn't understand either.
Well, that's quite conceivable, isn't it? Because it wasn't until it was given that wonderful ripe performance by Hugh Paddock and Kenneth Williams and that wonderful cast altogether, and all those scripts must have looked so innocent when Barry Took and Marty Feldman delivered them. On the page, I don't think it would come over to you as being evocative of naughty thoughts. But I think at that time, even you couldn't even say ruddy. Well, no, could you not say bloody? You couldn't say ruddy. You could not say cripes or crikey, because that would suggest that you maybe were talking about Jesus Crikey, the son of Gosh, and you would burn in the fires of heck.
Now, by May 1948, you were up to your ears in a show called Showtime. You want to tell me anything about that?
Oh, Showtime. Oh, Roy Spear. Yes, that fascinated me, that booking. It was when I was doing this enormous number of shows, when I the first sort of burst of getting onto radio because I'd been approved of so warmly by Dennis Wilson, that Showtime came up. It was on Thursdays from the People's Palace, Mile End Road, live, of course, on the air, and I was booked onto it, I think, as second comic on.
It's showtime, the Thursday night show.
My spot was preempted for a speech from Don Bradman, and they went over to the Guildhall or whatever they did, and so I wasn't heard. And my act didn't go well, but I didn't know that. I knew none of this. And when I turned up the following week, because they'd rebooked me, I couldn't believe they'd rebooked me. And I said to Roy Spear, "I didn't think it went very well last week." He said, "Well, no, I didn't listen to you, old boy. I knew you were out on the stage. I wasn't paying any attention. I was on the phone from Broadcasting House because they were broadcasting something else at the time. Did you not feel you went well?" And I said, "Well, no, I didn't, but I've rewritten the script completely." "Oh, I wouldn't bother. I'm not looking for some great success here, my lad." "Well, I am.
I'm just laughing on the outside and crying on the inside. And that's dangerous because you could drown that way. I know that tonight my girlfriend Elspeth is sitting by some other man's radio, eating his food, darning his socks, smoking his pipe. You said you loved me because I was so effervescent. Did you ever know me when I effervescent?
I followed Max Bygraves, and I was so impressed with him because he walked out, looked at the audience, said, "Oh my God," and fell flat on his back, which got an enormous laugh, but bewildered a few 100,000 people who were listening.
Yes, it's not a good gag for radio, is it?
Not really. Then he did another gag that he didn't think was awfully good, so he dropped his script and went, "Oh my God," and started picking up the pages and getting them in the wrong order, which also got hysterical laughs in the studio, where we were doing it, in the theatre. But again, very puzzling to the listener. But I admired his courage, his composure, his cool, and I wanted to do something similar. So I devised an act where I would have to run between different microphones in order to keep it going. And then I got a young actor called Richard Burton to pretend to be a BBC announcer and keep interrupting my act, as I had been interrupted on the programme previously.
Was he just a young blade who was trying to get into the BBC Drama Repertory Company at the time? Or?
I suppose he was. I got him through a casting agency. I just said, "I want someone who sounds like a BBC announcer," and they said, "We'll send someone along. It'll cost you £6, £6.06. And since I was being paid 4 guineas, I think, I made a loss on the deal. But nevertheless, he was excellent, and I thought he'd get somewhere one day.
Let's have a listen to a bit of Calling All Forces, because there's quite a good history to that, and quite a...
Oh, yes, Calling All...
Quite a list of names.
We were so lucky to get that. We'd only written 2 radio series up to that time. We'd written Hip Hip Hooray for Derek Roy and It's a Great Life for Bonacolino. But they'd been produced by Leslie Bridgemont, and it was Leslie who was given the job of creating a 1-hour comedy show for the Forces, and he came to me and Dennis to write it. We were very fortunate. It kept us in work for 4 years. Every single week.
Yes, they're calling all forces wherever you are, and you'll be hearing from
Philip Slessor,
Carol Carr, Ned Barney, Leslie Welsh, Tony Hancock, the George Mitchell Choir, the Stargazers, and Geraldo and his concert orchestra.
Obligatory singing troupe.
George Mitchell singers, together with the Stargazers.
Your master of ceremonies, Ted Ray.
Ted Ray, marvellous comic. I remember him from Does the Team Think.
Does the Team Think, and Razor Laugh was his great radio success. I learned so much from watching Ted.
Hello and welcome to the 36th edition of your own show. You know, I feel wonderful today. I really do. I suppose it's because I've just come from the golf course. And I had a pretty successful practice game. Well, a whole crowd of people followed me around the course. It seems for years they've been waiting to see me swing. Jealousy, that's all. Of course, it was rather a breezy day for golf, and the wind was playing such strange tricks with the ball. I drove off at the 9th hole, my caddy opened his mouth to yawn, and now he's the only man in England with 2 Adam's apples. As a matter of fact, I was playing Uncle Roscoe. He always boils all his golf balls in a big pot of onion.
Oh, I remember this.
And he doesn't have to look for a lost ball. He just takes a deep breath and comes in on the bean. And tonight we are presenting a spine-chilling fantasy of the African jungle, the story of King Solomon's fabulous mines. Beside myself, the other members of the cast include Mr. Tony Hancock.
Please, no applause. No applause, girl.
Now, wait a minute, Tony.
Recognizable.
You wonderful people do.
I love mixed audience.
His voice hasn't come in yet. He hasn't found his voice yet.
Tony, my boy, calm down. You're not such a lady killer.
Oh, no? I haven't been wasting my time backstage, you know. That Carol Carr.
Don't tell me you've kissed her already.
I do not kiss and tell. Let her do the bragging.
He doesn't sound comfortable.
Tony, I'm disappointed in you.
Don't take it so hard, Mr. Ray. I, too, have loved and lost, and look at me.
I'm looking, and I can see why you've lost. Really, I'm disgusted. Carrying on in a respectable theatre, bringing your nasty, wolfish habits into this program. Horrible. Ugh. And besides, if anyone's going to do any necking around here, it's me.
You?
Extraordinary that we had imposed upon us the idea that Tony Hancock should be a Lothario.
Most improbable.
Yes, but it's what Tony wanted at that time. And we did a series where he was the con man conning Charlie Chester, entirely the wrong way around.
Yes.
But the comedians would make these demands of the script. As long as we could make Ted sound quick and slick and funny, that's really all we cared about.
Hancock was very particular about his writing. He put Galtman and Simpson through hell, didn't
Yes.
he?
Yes, he
doing
did.
rewrite after rewrite. No, we can do better.
Yes, but of course Galtman and Simpson very brilliantly, as only Alan and Ray could have done. I don't think Dennis and I could have done it. Homed in on all Hancock's actual characteristics and slowly exaggerated them to the point where he would almost recognize himself, but not quite. So the pomposity was used, so the pretentiousness was used, so the stinginess was used, the self-admiration. All those things went into the script. I don't think Hancock ever really fully realized that he was caricaturing himself in the same way that Jack Benny's writers had done with Jack. It's the best way to write for a comic, I think, is to find out his true persona, what is radiating, what the audience will believe in, and then start exaggerating it and building it up, and using it, of course, for the best jokes.
He was very rude about a script of yours.
He was. He said it was written on toilet paper, and he could prove it. And he then went to the toilet and used it in lieu of the softer variety, and brought it back and showed it to us, unfortunately. It's something I could have done without. But Tony was slightly possessed, and he was close to this kind of manic thing that the great comics need in order to do their best work, I think. That little touch of being not entirely in charge of your own brain.
Those drums, they're driving me mad.
Oh, Mr. Quartermain. Oh, I can't go on. I'm so thirsty.
Well, I was saving this, but you can have it.
What is it?
Snake milk.
Snake milk?
Yes.
Well, how in the world do you get snake milk?
Oh, the usual way, but you need a very low stool.
We heard a bit of Calling All Forces. There was an episode which, sadly, the archive doesn't have, your archive doesn't appear to have, involving a sketch with Ted Ray and Diana Dawes.
Oh, yes. It was recorded onto discs, but they used to destroy them. I mean, once they had gone for the General Overseas Service, and therefore the forces had heard the shows and they'd been gone out to Cyprus or whatever, then there was no tape, you see, at that time. We're talking 1950 with that sketch, and tape recording hadn't been introduced till the following year. In fact, we've discovered it when we went to Hamburg. We were astonished at it. Good Lord, you mean everything we've done on that little piece of tape? How is that possible? But then I had in my possession before that, some years before that, a Webster Chicago wire recorder, which I used to dictate dreadful pulp novels, which were pre-sold for £10 each. So I knew you could put something on something quite small. But that particular occasion was extraordinary, because Diana was sensational. The Forces audience was crazy about her. So was I.
She was a sort of British Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield all rolled into one.
Very generously rolled.
With Mae West overtones.
Yes. Oh, she was a bloody good comedian. Really very, very good. Wonderful timing. Great sense of fun. Ted Ray, of course, was immaculate in his timing. You know, whatever you gave him, he would turn it into something funnier than you'd given him. And then there was the wonderfully eccentric Max Wall. Max would either tear the place apart because he was so funny, or would die a death such as you've never seen, going down in complete silence, to which he would respond by going, "Success! I'm a success! There's my stool. Bring the stool for my bottom. I wish to sit and stare at these people. They're funnier than I am." I still love that man.
Complete original, Max.
Yes. On that occasion, we had cut something from the script in such a way that lines were put in juxtaposition to suggest something very rude indeed. No one foresaw that was going to happen, but simply by saying, well, cut page 5, we went from page 4 to page 6, and suddenly 2 lines came together, which I don't think even today we could broadcast. But the audience seized upon it, of course, loved it. And then, of course, the 3 artists realized what they'd done and started cracking up. And Max became more and more bizarre, strutting around the stage like a peacock, flinging his pages of his script in the air. Oh dear, the memory of it. I've never heard such laughter in my life. It was quite marvellous. And it's a shame it wasn't preserved. But at the same time, it taught us something. It taught us that you could do the unexpected, or plan to appear to do the unexpected. That was just a happy or unhappy coincidence, however way you looked at it. But I know that there was a hell of a row at the BBC. I mean, just a hell of a row. Leslie Bridgemont was going to get sacked, and he was staff. The sound engineer was going to go. We were never going to work again. And then the reaction came in from the public. The appreciation index went just through the roof. People had loved the show. And so the Board of BBC Governors was quieted, and we were reinstated by the following Sunday. We were told...
But you posted abroad or something at some point around then?
Well, no, it wasn't so much that incident. That was another one. That's when we went to Hamburg. We went over to Germany to do Calling All Forces from Lüneburg and from Hamburg. And, of course, they were the last 2 of that particular series. Then we went straight on into something called the Forces Show, which had Kenneth Horne and Richard Murdoch and Sam Coster in it. And occasionally, if we could persuade her to return, Diana Dawes. Then that became the Jack Buchanan Forces Show, which we wrote with Diana Dawes as a resident.
Yeah.
As a resident sex pot. And lots of guests, terrific guests on that one.
Including Bob Hope.
Including the wonderful Bob Hope, who at that time, I suppose, was at the very zenith of his career.
It's good to be broadcasting for the jolly BBC. Put it there, pal. Put it there. They've been trying to get a sponsor now since 1923.
You met him through Jerry Desmond, didn't you?
Yes.
Huh?
Knowing Jerry, we just gave him some script at the stage door and said, would you show it to him? The next thing we knew, Jerry took us to see The Great Man. And Hope looked at our material and said, some of this is very good. Write me some jokes. Well, we were already writing for Jack Benny. So this was a tremendous second feather in our caps.
Companions.
Confederate.
Chums to the end.
Like meat and potatoes.
Or salt and tomatoes. Boy, what a blend. Don't put it in the papers. Don't put it on the air. Don't put it on the shelf. Put it in there.
Jack Benny would pay us £10 a joke. Hope never paid us a penny. All the years that we worked for him.
And yet it's Benny who had the reputation for stinginess.
Yes. And I think the reputation for stinginess was genuine. His writers took advantage of it and built it into his show, and then Benny himself decided he wasn't going to be seen that way in real life, so he became over-generous with tipping and that kind of thing.
Bob Hope clearly wasn't concerned by that.
Hope was tight-fisted beyond belief. Hope would make his writers stand at the bottom of the staircase and float their checks down to them and watch them scramble for them. I mean, he was a mean man. And,
that is mean.
But a brilliant man, and a hero for me, of comedy. Just a sensational personality on the stage, dynamic, and I loved writing for him because he knew exactly what you meant him to do, and he did it.
Oh,
this is the actual show.
I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine. He's not only one of the world's greatest entertainers, but you'll go a long, long way before you meet a nicer fella than Bob Hope.
So that was Jack Buchanan bringing him on.
That was Jack
the
Buchanan,
regular host of the show.
Yes. Jack was an international star. He just made the bandwagon with Fred Astaire. He knew Hope well. He wanted to be like Hope on the radio. So we had to write very Hope-ish stuff for him. Yeah. Charming man. Gosh, this was exciting for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I can see this.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, spot of heckling?
Must have some of the older folks out there.
Where's Bingley shouted?
Ah.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bob Wizard Prang. Get your knees down. Up the Mantlelows, and what the heck do they say in the Boy Scouts Hope? Telling you that it's great to be broadcasting for the BBC. BBC, that's the Bernard Braden Club.
Bernard was always on the air at that time.
That's an English joke. I found it on my crumpet this morning. No, I really called. I called on the chief director of the BBC this week, but he couldn't see me. He was too busy trying to persuade Churchill to declare war on Luxembourg.
Radio Luxembourg was very successful at that time.
That's another English joke. You see, Radio Luxembourg is a commercial opposition, sort of a Clement Attlee with sponsors.
Did he have to take all this on trust?
Yes, absolutely.
These explanations, by the way, are for the tourists. They're the ones wearing British clothes. But it's great to be...
He didn't ask us to explain it to him. He just assumed that we got it right.
In London, Danny Kaye nearly
It's quite a compliment,
refused me
isn't
a
it?
re-entry
It was.
from it, but I made it. He loves it here in London, you know. He always gets the best of everything. Even has monogram fog.
It's the
But I've
smog
loved it here,
era.
the tea and
Yes.
everything. I've had so much tea I slosh when I walk, and I want to tell you...
And I want to tell you.
Next week we go to Paris.
Well, a lot of comics have done that. Bob Hope's was, and I want to tell you, and it worked every time. Right after, immediately after the punchline, just continue talking and say, and I want to tell you, and then it's a self-interrupt. It's a technique that works okay, but becomes very wearing after a while on an audience. You can't really do it today if you're going to go on stage for an hour.
No.
You can't do something like that. There's a very funny Irish comic who pretends that the people are asking him questions. Just, you ask me any questions you like. What do I think of birthday cakes? Well, that's an interesting one. And every now and then pulls from his pocket a piece of paper that says, be funnier, and puts it away again. It's wonderful for 10 minutes. For 20 minutes, it's not.
No.
And most of these tricks will stand repetition only so far, and only if the comic is working a short while on the stage. You can see, Harry Worth, whom I adored, developed that extraordinary technique for laughing, or seeming to laugh, during the punchline. I've never heard anyone else do it. You'd say, I put my key in the front door, and I wonder what I'm letting myself in for.
How do you do? Now, if it's all right with you, I'd like to start by telling you a joke. Now, this story is about a doctor, and by the way, I am not going to tell you that joke about the man who's going to see the doctor, and he meets his friend, and his friend says, what are you going to the doctor's for? And he says, I'm going to the doctor's because I don't like the look of my wife. And his friend says, hang on a minute, I'll come with you, I hate the sight of mine. No, this one's about the lady who rings the doctor to come and see her husband, and he tells her to take his temperature, meaning her husband, not the doctor. Because there's some things that you cannot do on the telephone, and that is one of them. That isn't a joke, by the way. Although I suppose if one thought about...
there was a comic called Billy Matcham who used to always do the punchline. Then I asked him what to do with the extra telegraph pole, and then again, you know. That was his immediate continuation, after every gag. And I said, well, why is that fairy on top of the tree? I said, she knows better than you. And then again, you know. So it was a technique that was developed really in the variety theatres and vaudeville theatres by people who had to do their act every night, no matter what the audience was like. And first last Tuesday, you weren't going to get laughs.
Yes.
So you might as well do what Benny Hill used to do. Benny used to talk all the way through the laugh. He used to say, ladies and gentlemen, she was a lovely girl. She was a robust girl. All row and no... You know, one of the funniest things I ever knew was to see was, and I met her father then. Yes, then I met the girl's father. And the audience hadn't heard them mumbling in them because they were laughing during it, but he would still keep talking because he'd learned to do that in theatres where there were only 17 people in the audience and most of them were reading newspapers.
Once upon a time, there lived a very sweet young lady of some 17 summers and 24 winters. And she was called Angelica. Of course, all the boys used to call her Angel for short, but not for long. She was a shy and sensitive creature, and she liked nothing better than to walk around the zoo and feed the squirrels to the lions.
The odd thing about doing radio was that it made you a star in the 50s, whereas television didn't until the later 50s. But radio could make you a big star in the 40s and 50s. And yet, the golden age of shows like The Goons, Razor Laugh, Hancock, Take It From Here, they all happened in the 50s. And Dennis and I were writing all these shows of our own and appearing on shows. We never could get a signature show off. We got a big hit and we got the radio award for writing Hello Playmates for Arthur Askey and David Nixon. And we were in that as the writers who kept mixing Arthur up. But we couldn't actually get off to the races ourselves, and we never did. The closest we ever came to it was a series called Starstruck, which I think was my favourite radio series ever, produced by the great Pat Dixon. What a marvellous man he was. A great knowledge of comedy and a great desire to do something completely different than had ever been done before. So he encouraged us to do things that other producers would say, I don't think that's not very safe. I don't think a crowd will like that. No, Pat would say, no, go a bit further. Try and extend your reach. And so we did. And we did that series, I think we did around about 39.5 hours, packed with comedy. Absolutely, maybe too packed, maybe too joke-filled. But we had everybody in the business on it. I mean, every comedian wanted to be on it because they knew that we were writing the cream of our ideas went into this show. So we had some superstars on it. And certainly I have a few old recordings, reel-to-reel recordings of Starstruck. And among the outstanding guests that we got, I think two of our favourites that we were always asking them to come back were Peter Sellers, with whom I nearly had a double wedding. I don't mean I was going to marry him. I mean, he and his bride and me and mine.
Yeah, well, you'd be one of the few people who didn't marry Peter Sellers, aren't you?
Lie back and think of Eklund. And Terry Thomas, who, of course, became an international star and was tremendously successful in movies, both here and in the States. So when we had either Sellers or Thomas on the show, Terry and Thomas on the show, we knew that we had two of the finest performers, so we used to write up to the highest level we could possibly write.
This is the BBC Home Service.
Amazing we weren't on the light.
Yes, they didn't seem to divide things up in the same sort of way.
No, they didn't.
It was all rather arbitrary.
Each week we had a super orchestra. This would be Lou Stone or Geraldo or Ambrose would be our guest orchestra.
Stars of the day.
They were, and John Dankworth.
And Bob Monkhouse and Dennis Goodwin hope they won't be edge-struck, as once again they're star-struck. Tonight by Dick Bentley, Peter Sellers, Beryl Reid, Nat Temple and his star-struck orchestra, and our songster Alma Coker. And now meet our heroes, Bob and Dennis.
Oh, who's leading the cheering there, Bob?
I think that was probably Barbara, Dennis's wife.
I've got a big drain under my house.
You got a big drain under your house?
Yes, you must drop him.
Thank you.
Dennis sounded so much older than you, but you were the same age, weren't you?
Yes, in fact, he was a year younger.
In the world.
Yes, we'll now remind you of that joke.
Hey, Nat Temple, who was that lady I saw you with last night?
That was no lady, I'm happy to say.
That joke has its variations in every country around the globe.
For instance, France. Hey, Pierre, who was that lady I saw you out with last night?
That was no lady, that was your wife.
Oh. Egypt.
Hey, Pharaoh, who was that lady I saw you out with last night?
That was no lady, that was my mummy.
Monte Carlo.
Hey, Prime Minister, who was that highness you saw me out with last night?
That wasn't a highness, your highness, that was your grace.
Oh, I see.
Grace Kelly joke. Grace Kelly, Prince Rainier joke. That was hot stuff then.
Hey, now look, who was that Eskimo lady I saw you with last night?
Last night? Which month?
You see, the nights are 6 months long up there in Scotland.
God.
Hey, Jock, who is that wee bearded lady you were out with last night?
That was no wee bearded lady. My sporran was dragging.
Sporran was dragging, oh dear. Well, forced applause on that.
Around the world.
And Starstruck pays tribute to the pioneers of modern travel as we present...
Rails to the West.
This is the year 1860. The place, the hot deserts of the Wild West. I am head of the Santa Fe Railroad Company. Full name Agnes.
Who are we listening to now?
Beryl Reid.
Beryl Reid. Was she a regular?
Yes, whenever we could get her. She loved working with us, and we adored her.
She was brilliant.
Mind your own business.
Pardon me, ma'am. It's me, Luke. Construction crew.
Dick Bentley.
And how's the crew getting along?
Well, they can't lay no more tracks in this hot sun, ma'am. They're dying like flies.
And why is that?
They are flies.
They say you hired flies to build this railway.
Pretty shrewd move, ma'am.
Huh?
When the track's finished, we won't have to sack the crew.
What do we do?
Swat them.
This is not good enough. Where's my head engineer?
What is it, my good man?
Who's that?
Sellers as Henry Crumb.
Man, did I hear you utter? I am a woman.
At my age, what does it matter? Straight. And with her looks, what does it matter anyway? A bit late, but got it in.
We've been laying this track for 3 years now. And how long is it?
3 inches.
In 3 years, you've only laid 3 inches of track?
I may be slow, but I'm neat, you know.
And you continued to write for him when he started to develop a recording career, bringing out albums like Songs for Swinging Cellars.
Oh, there's a track on that called Auntie Rotter.
Hello, children.
For which I think I still receive the occasional cheque. 3 shillings and sixpence equivalent, whatever that is today, will come through because of sales in Antigua or somewhere. It doesn't often get played. Any chance of...
Here is your music for today. That's nice. Then it's
up on a chair behind a door. Hey, diddle. Here comes Papa, so up with your chopper and split him down the middle.
Bye-bye, children. Ta-da, children.
Look, the Indians have stopped. One of them is coming forward for a powwow.
This is what I want to do. I want to make people imagine stupid, crazy things that I can't possibly do on television visually.
Greetings, warrior brave.
When?
Don't you mean how?
Me know how, baby, when.
That's enough out of you. Now, you take us to your chief.
Very well, I call chief. Oh, mighty leader of the red man. Strong as the lion. Wise as the moon. Great as the mountain. Come.
Now, here you come in, my good.
I like this game, playing Red Indian.
You going to help us build our railroad?
Yes, I'm an Indian, and I want to be a driver. Then I would be an Indian driver. You rotten, perfect one, you. You've deaded me.
And Dennis and I used to make one another laugh a great deal with this kind of stuff. So there was a great joy in composing these scripts. And
could anyone be happy with the love I get? I've known you for a year and haven't kissed you yet. To get a kiss from you is like a game of tag. You're just a little scallywag.
by the mid-50s, we were writing the show a day. Some of them were television by then. So we were writing the Showband show for Mondays and for Saturdays, which was still available in the Showband. So a lot of comedy in between, which Dennis and I did with Ricky Fulton. And then we were doing the Cyril Fletcher show, mixed doubles, with Cyril Fletcher and Betty Estelle. And we were doing Between Times with Braden, with Bernard Braden and his team, and Barbara Kelly, Benny Lee. We were doing a quiz show called For Love or Money, and another one called, Bury the Hatchet. What a piece of nonsense that was.
When I'll be catching you, and then I'll shout a big hooray and wave a flag for you, my little scallywag.
Someone said, with radio, the pictures are better. Well, only if you have an imagination and a sense of humor.
It's a good thing I'm so strong. And if you think that I'll keep up this silly pace, no, baby, you're right. I may be kind of old before the chase is through, but there will come a day when I'll be catching you. And then I'll shout a big hooray and wave a flag for you, my little scallywag.
Now, on behalf of everyone in the show,
This is Bob Monkhouse.
and Dennis Goodwin.
Saying good night and thanks for listening.
With you next week.
Goodbye.
Bob Monkhouse and Dennis Goodwin were starstruck this week by Dick Bentley, Peter Sellers, Beryl Reid, Alma Cogan, and Nat Temple and his orchestra. The script was by Bob Monkhouse and Dennis Goodwin, and the production by John Hooper.
And Bob Sinfield was starstruck this week by Bob Monkhouse. The script was written mostly by Bob Monkhouse. The producer was Julian Mayers.